On the day of being diagnosed with stomach cancer, Jiang Zixuan rekindled his old flame with his first love. He and she were kissing in the private room and drinking cross-cupped wine at the birthday banquet. Everyone said that they were childhood sweethearts and a perfect match. But I am Jiang Zixuan's wife. The day Su Chacha broke up was Jiang Zixuan's birthday. When I entered the private room carrying a birthday cake, Jiang Zixuan was about to drink cross-cupped wine while holding Su Chacha. Everyone said that they were childhood sweethearts and a match made in heaven. But no one knew that Jiang Zixuan was a married man. His wife, it's me. When Su Chacha saw me coming in, she gave me a fierce glare. She took the wine handed to her by Jiang Zixuan and showed me a provocative smile. Amid the cheers of the crowd, she and Jiang Zixuan raised their glasses together and drank the cross-cupped wine in one gulp. The atmosphere in the room quickly heated up, and a group of people excitedly clapped and shouted, "Kiss! Kiss!" Su Chacha's face was slightly flushed as she leaned on Jiang Zixuan's shoulder and looked at him affectionately. I hid the loneliness in my eyes, put down the cake, and turned to leave. Jiang Zixuan loudly called out to me, his tone teasing, "And Shin, it's not fun if you're not here on my birthday." Everyone's inquisitive gazes fell on me, as if looking at some fresh gossip. They all knew that I was Jiang Zixuan's little sycophant who had been pining for him for many years without result. Jiang Zixuan kept me here only to torture me. He pressed me on the sofa and forced me to watch him being affectionate with Su Chacha. He held Su Chacha in his arms, cupped the back of Su Chacha's head with his big hand, and kissed her. Under the dim light, a pair of lovers were kissing passionately. Someone who loved to watch the excitement said, "Brother Juan, kissin' Shin too." She's crying. Only then did I realize that there were wet liquids on my face. I hurriedly turned around and wiped away my tears. Su Chacha sent Jiang Zixuan away on the pretext of fetching a birthday present. Then she led her little followers and surrounded me. She handed me a glass of wine and said with a smile, "Sister and Shin, this wine is from Zixuan to me. I brought it here specially this time. Have a taste. I am allergic to alcohol. Once I drink it, I break out in rashes all over my body and it is extremely itchy." Su Chacha knows this. Seeing me frown, the smile in her eyes grew even stronger. "Sister and Shin, I poured you wine with good intentions. You can't refuse me." Her tone was gentle but implied a warning. I took the glass of wine and poured it on the carpet in front of her, saying word by word, "I don't drink." Su Chacha's smile instantly froze, and her eyes were filled with anger at being contradicted. She gave a look to her little followers, and a group of people surrounded me layer by layer. They pulled my hair, pried open my jaw, and forcefully poured wine into my mouth. The hard bottle mouth pressed against my teeth, and the spicy wine poured from my mouth into my throat. That spiciness burned my esophagus, and I couldn't help but cough violently, coughing until tears streamed down. In the hazy mist, I saw Su Chacha show me a sweet smile. Under her command, those people became even more crazy. They opened a new bottle of wine and poured the wine into my nose and collar. Some wine choked into my esophagus, and I coughed wildly, almost suffocating. Someone was afraid that something would happen to me and stopped this bullying. The moment those people let go, I knelt on the ground, bent down, and vomited violently. The liquid in my nose flowed out along the nasal cavity, and I finally breathed in fresh air. I knelt on the ground, patted my chest with my hand to calm myself down. It took me a long time to come to my senses. On the carpet, my pulled-out hair was mixed with wine and vomit, in a mess. Su Chacha clicked her tongue, covered her nose in disgust, and called the cleaner. I supported myself on my knees and got up unsteadily, endured the itch on my body, and moved step by step behind Su Chacha. I said to her, "Miss Su, I have a gift for you." When she turned around, I grabbed her hair and slapped her left and right on the face. Amid the exclamations of the crowd, I mustered all my strength and slapped her into a pig's head. Su Chacha covered her face and screamed. Her fair little face was swollen high, and my handprints were clearly printed on it. I took out a tissue and wiped my hands. Tilting my head, I asked her, "Miss Su, do you like the slap I gave you?" Su Chacha was so angry that her lips were trembling. She looked into my eyes, took 2 steps back and distanced herself from me. The atmosphere on the scene was restless. Su Chacha's followers were in a flurry icing her face. The people around instantly fell silent. Jiang Zixuan came back carrying a gift box. When he saw Su Chacha's swollen face, he was extremely distressed. He held Su Chacha in his arms and gently asked, "Who bullied you?" Su Chacha leaned in his arms and cried so hard that she could hardly catch her breath. The scene was deadly silent. No one dared to answer. The atmosphere was extremely oppressive. Su Chacha's makeup was all smudged. While sobbing, she raised her finger and pointed at me. She hit me. Jiang Zixuan stared at me, his eyes becoming cold and fierce. He crooked his finger at me and ordered, "Shin, come here." I stood numbly in place and explained in a hoarse voice, "She forced me to drink." The rashes on my neck and face could prove that I was indeed forced to drink by Su Chacha. Jiang Zixuan stared at my face for a long time. Suddenly, he laughed. "You've even learned the art of playing the victim. How clever." I held my breath. A fine and dense pain spread in my heart. I suddenly felt how ridiculous I was. Clearly, I was so despicable in his heart, yet I still fantasized that he would listen to my explanation. When Jiang Zixuan saw me standing still, his brows deeply furrowed. The sound of his voice dropped several degrees as he said, "Shin." It was a warning tone. "Don't make me say it a third time." I took a deep breath, lowered my eyes, and moved step by step to his side. He stood up, slowly unbuttoned his cuffs and rotated his wrist. With a slap, my face was slapped hard to one side. That huge force hit my right cheek. For a moment, my eyes went dark and my eardrums ached. I could barely stand still. I held onto the table with both hands tightly to barely steady my staggering figure. Jiang Zixuan stepped over and grabbed my neck. His eyes were so fierce that he could kill. "Shin, are you tired of living?" He squeezed tighter and tighter. A strong sense of suffocation hit me. I panicked and tried to pull his hand off, desperately wanting to breathe fresh air. The figure in front of me slowly blurred, and all sensations were slowly disappearing. "Zixuan, I return my life to the Jiang family. From now on, we owe nothing to each other." My consciousness slowly sank to the bottom and I closed my eyes heavily. "Shin." He was calling me, his tone tinged with panic. But I couldn't feel it anymore. My consciousness sank into a dream and I saw 7-year-old Jiang Zixuan. That year, my seriously ill grandfather entrusted me to his comrade in arms, Jiang Zixuan's grandfather. The little me, wearing washed-out clothes, shrank behind my grandfather and timidly looked at the luxurious Jiang family mansion. Mrs. Jiang, wearing a gyeongsam, brought Jiang Zixuan and Jiang Xiang, who were competing for a game controller, over and said to them, "This is your sister." Jiang Zixuan was so happy that he almost took off. Jumping up and down, he said, "I have a sister now." Jiang Xiang handed over a white rabbit toffee and smiled gently. "Sister, I am your brother. From now on, Zixuan and I will protect you well." I blushed and took the candy, thanking him in a voice softer than a mosquito. Uncle Jiang led me to the bedroom. In the room, the half-open blinds projected the warm sun outside the window. On the soft big bed, there was a row of exquisite plush toys. Jiang Zixuan picked up a pink plush toy and presented it to me like a treasure. Under my grandfather's signal, I stretched out my little hand and hugged the plush doll that was bigger than my body. I rubbed the big head of the doll. The soft touch was like a cloud. Jiang Zixuan raised his chin and proudly showed off to Jiang Xiang, "Look, my sister likes the doll I picked." In response, Jiang Xiang rolled his eyes. That night, my grandfather and I stayed at the Jiang family. He held me and lay on the soft big bed, falling asleep. My life trajectory underwent a drastic change from then on. When I woke up the next day, grandfather's body had already turned cold. Mrs. Jiang held me, who was crying hysterically, in her arms and comforted me softly. Jiang Zixuan held a bunch of dolls and handed them to me one by one. Scenes of grandfather flashed through my mind. I leaned softly on Mrs. Jiang's shoulder, without any strength. The Jiang family cremated grandfather's body. The old man who had propped up a sky for me became a small square box. In front of grandfather's grave, Uncle Jiang asked me to call him father and Mrs. Jiang mother. That day, I, who was adrift and alone, had a new home. In the following life, the Jiang family protected me and sheltered me from the wind and rain. Until later, on Mrs. Jiang's birthday, Jiang Xiang accompanied me to pick out a birthday present. When facing a speeding big truck, he pushed me away but was hit and flew 30 meters away. By the time we arrived at the hospital, Jiang Xiang, who was covered in blood, had already lost his breath. In the noisy hospital, Uncle Jiang suffered a heart attack due to the shock and died after ineffective rescue. Mrs. Jiang, with her black hair, guarded the two corpses and turned white-haired overnight. I stood pale-faced at the door of the morgue. Guilt and pain intertwined into a net at this moment, wrapping my heart and tightening instantly, making me extremely painful. As my consciousness gradually returned, I smelled the disinfectant again. Jiang Zixuan stood by the window and lit a cigarette. Hearing the noise, he turned and met my gaze. A mocking smile appeared on his face. "And Shin, why aren't you dead yet?" I stroked my fingers and slowly exhaled. "Zixuan, do you really want me to die?" He stubbed out the cigarette and hid his face in the smoke. His emotions were indistinguishable. I heard him say, "Yes. Only when you die will I be happy." The nurse came in and handed me the meal. I held back my tears and opened the lunchbox. Inside was my favorite preserved egg and lean pork congee. Under the lunchbox were also a few white rabbit toffees. I took the spoon and ate one mouthful after another. The porridge was so hot that it made my nose tingle. The doctor knocked on the door with a report in his hand, looking serious. "Family member, come here." Jiang Zixuan's phone rang. He pressed the speakerphone. Inside came Su Chacha's coquettish voice. "Zixuan, why haven't you arrived yet on my birthday?" "Soon." He had a faint smile on his lips. He picked up his coat and left directly. When passing by the doctor, he said, "I am not her family member." The doctor looked at me with some embarrassment. "Missin, your illness is a bit troublesome. It's best to call your family member." I forced a bitter smile and remained silent. Jiang Zixuan was going to accompany his little childhood sweetheart to celebrate her birthday. How could he care about me? As for Mrs. Jiang, she had long hated me and would never come to the hospital to take care of me. I am an orphan. Just tell me the result directly. Strictly speaking, I am indeed an orphan and I have never seen my biological parents. It was grandfather who dug me out of the stinky garbage dump and raised me until I was 6 years old. The doctor held my report, his eyes full of sympathy. After struggling for a long time, he said, "It's stomach cancer." A week ago, when I was brushing my teeth, I suddenly vomited a mouthful of blood. I came to this hospital alone to have an unanesthetized gastroscopy. The test results only came out today. I trembled as I took the test report and hid my head under the quilt. A strong sense of fear enveloped me. As night fell, I tossed and turned and dialed Jiang Zixuan's phone. "Zixuan, I am sick. Can you?" "Ha ha ha, being sick is good. It'd be best if it's an incurable disease." On the other end of the phone, Su Chacha was extremely excited. "This is simply the best birthday present for me." She laughed and hung up the phone. I clutched the phone tightly and stood there in a daze. Over the years, Jiang Zixuan has been supporting the Jian group alone. His phone is never allowed to be touched by outsiders. I can't touch his phone, but Su Chacha can. For Jiang Zixuan, Su Chacha is an insider, while I am an outsider. I stayed in the hospital for 3 days and received a lot of medications. Finally, on the Mid-Autumn Festival, the doctor agreed to let me go home for a day. I went to the mall and carefully selected and bought a lot of dishes that Mrs. Jiang and Jiang Zixuan like to eat. After returning home, I didn't ask the nanny for help. I was busy in the kitchen alone for 3 hours before finishing making 15 dishes. I poured the red wine that Mrs. Jiang loves to drink into the decanter. As soon as I looked up, I met her disgusted eyes. I put on a smiling face and said ingratiatingly, "Mom, today is the Mid-Autumn Festival for family reunion." "Shut up." She interrupted me sharply. Her eyes were full of red blood vessels. "What right do you have to call me Mom?" Looking at her grey hair, the guilt in my heart gushed out and almost completely engulfed me. She was right. I had no right. Because I cost the Jiang family 2 lives. The once happy and harmonious family fell apart overnight. I stood there at a loss, feeling as if I was being roasted on a fire. The nanny came over to smooth things over for me. "Madam, the young lady cooked alone for 3 hours today." With a bang, Mrs. Jiang overturned the table. The dishes fell to the ground and were smashed to pieces. Who told her to cook? Some fragments flew onto my calf. Blood flowed down my skin to the floor. I silently bent down to clean up the mess. The sharp fragments cut my fingers. Tears and blood mixed and dripped onto the floor. I gently wiped away my tears and said, "Auntie, I'm sorry." After cleaning up the mess, Mrs. Jiang and the nanny went to the kitchen. I stood outside the glass door and watched them busy. Jiang Zixuan brought Su Chacha, who was carrying many gifts, back home. As soon as she entered the door, she went straight to the dining table. Wow, godmother, your cooking is so good. In the past, Mrs. Jiang would only cook on my birthday and New Year's Eve. Now she has made a table of dishes for Su Chacha. I envy her so much. There were 3 chairs placed in front of the dining table, and none of them was for me. I shrank in the corner on the second floor and watched them have a lively meal. Mrs. Jiang kept picking up dishes for Su Chacha. There was a loving smile on her face. Jiang Zixuan buried his head in peeling shrimps for Su Chacha and filled her bowl to the brim. I hid in the dark and ate the instant noodles that the nanny brought me. The noodles were so hot that it made my eyes burn. At this moment, I was like a clown, secretly peeping at the happiness that didn't belong to me. After eating the instant noodles, I remembered the doctor's advice to be hospitalized for treatment as soon as possible. So I went back to my room to pack some change of clothes. When I opened the door, I found that there were no traces of my life in the room anymore. Beside the bed, the photo of me and Jiang Zixuan was replaced by one of him and Su Chacha. The pink doll that Jiang Zixuan gave me on the bed was also gone. With red eyes, I pushed open the cloakroom. My shoes and bags were all gone. Only Su Chacha's coats and skirts were seen. After staying in the hospital for 3 days, I had no home. The nanny led me, who was in a daze, to the storage room where all my daily necessities were piled up. I opened the suitcase and put in the family photo album and that somewhat old pink doll. The nanny packed my change of clothes for me. In that pile of sundries, I rummaged through but couldn't find the bracelet left to me by Grandpa. When I was a child, I had a poor constitution and caught a cold every 2 or 3 days. The grandma next door told Grandpa that he could go to the temple to ask for a bracelet for safety. Grandpa, who never believed in gods and Buddhas, kowtowed step by step and went up to the temple to get the bracelet. Later, I often had to perform with the dance troupe. Afraid of losing the bracelet, I left it at home. I carried my suitcase and asked Jiang Zixuan, "Where is my bracelet?" Su Chacha popped out, shook her wrist, and asked provocatively, "Sister Anshin, do you mean this?" Zhuan said this bracelet can keep me safe, so he gave it to me. Don't blame him. He just spoils me too much. Pressing my faintly aching stomach, I said firmly, "This is mine. Give it back to me." She smiled gently and took off the bracelet and was about to hand it to me. "Okay, I'll give it back to you." Suddenly, she loosened her hand. The bracelet fell to the ground and the beads scattered all over the place. My heart suddenly skipped a beat and my hands and feet instantly turned cold. Grandpa's figure flashed through my mind scene by scene. He touched my head and said with a smile, "Shinshin, wearing the bracelet that Grandpa asked for you can keep you alive for 100 years. I picked up the red wine bottle and hit Su Chacha on the head again and again. Her head was split open. Blood flowed down her forehead drop by drop. Her eyes were filled with fear. She cried and hid behind Jiang Zixuan. "Help!" I rushed forward in one stride and frantically tore her hair. "Why did you let go? Why?" Jiang Zixuan came up and grabbed me. I glared at him with red eyes and questioned sharply, "You clearly know that it is a relic left to me by Grandpa. Why did you give it to her?" "I owe you. I repay it with my life." "Why did you touch what Grandpa left me?" He threw me against the wall. My head hit the wall and everything went black. Someone grabbed my collar and said harshly, "Anshin, if you go crazy again, get out." My blurred vision gradually recovered. I saw Jiang Zixuan's eyes that wanted me to die. I replied softly, "Okay, I'll leave." Blood flowed out of my nose and dripped onto the back of his hand. I skillfully tilted up my nose and held it back. "What's wrong with you?" Jiang Zixuan's grip on me suddenly loosened. I pried open his fingers one by one and pushed him away. "None of your business." I wiped off the nosebleed and knelt down and kowtowed heavily to Mrs. Jiang. "Auntie, take care." She turned her head aside as if she didn't want to see me. I sighed and was about to leave with my suitcase. Su Chacha shouted at me from behind, "Godmother has raised you, this jinx, for so many years. Do you want to leave without paying back the money?" It's true that the Jiang family spent a lot of money raising me for 19 years. I had all the learning resources that Jiang Zixuan had, and even more. Before I was 10 years old, I completed global travels. I learned all kinds of skills such as skiing, diving, photography, dancing, painting, and flying a plane. I opened my phone and, in front of Jiang Zixuan, transferred all the deposits in my card to his card. Then I got in a taxi and left the home where I had lived for 19 years. I ate the white rabbit toffee and looked at the Jiang family mansion in the rearview mirror that was getting farther and farther away. I could no longer find my way home. Among these countless lights, not a single one is lit for me. After a week of treatment in the hospital, I went to the Jiang family and waited for Jiang Zixuan in the garage. Zhao Zhao brought a clipper and wanted to shave my head. I protected my head and vowed to defend my long, black, and straight hair. Zhao Zhao, don't shave it. You know, I love beauty the most. She imitated a soft voice and coaxed me gently, we have to shave it. Shaving it is good for treatment. I was very angry and shrank into the quilt and shouted aggrievedly, I don't want to shave it. I don't want to. My long hair had been well taken care of by me. I really couldn't bear to part with it. Jiang Zixuan lifted my quilt and held a few white rabbit toffees in his hand. He coaxed me and said, Shinshin, if you shave your hair, you can have candies. I frowned and asked him, Jiang Zixuan, do you want to save me and then torture me again? His face was deathly pale and his lips trembled. Shinshin, I don't have this thought. I sighed deeply. If not this thought, then what thought? After all, for Jiang Zixuan, I only have the value of being an emotional outlet. If I die, it will be very difficult for him to find an emotional trash can like me again. He grabbed my hand and interlocked his fingers with mine. Shinshin, I really hope you survive and be well. His expression was very sincere, as if he really cared about me. I broke free from his hand and said softly, don't. If I die, you will be happy. Jiang Zixuan was about to cry again. I turned my head and didn't want to look. I said to Zhao Zhao, shave it. But make it look good. Even if I have to be a bald head, I should be a beautiful bald head. Zhao Zhao shaved my hair with red eyes. My head felt cool. It was really a bit strange. Later, Jiang Zixuan somehow invited experts. They examined me every day and prescribed injection medications. Zhao Zhao said that those injection medications were very effective. They cost 150,000 yuan per injection. It's really pitiful for my butt. I got many injections and it hurt so much that I wanted to go home. Oh, I forgot. I have no home. After 3 months of continuous injections, my body still gradually became thinner. Sure enough, money is not everything. The weather gradually became colder. Outside the window, there was snow everywhere. I clamored to go outside to see the snow. Jiang Zixuan put on a thick coat for me with hesitation. Shinshin, go back after playing for a while, okay? No. I leaned on the windowsill and exhaled a breath of warm air. Outside, there was heavy snow like goose feathers. I stretched out my hand and caught a snowflake. The snowflake stayed on my hand and soon disappeared. Just like my life, it was fleeting. Shinshin, happy birthday. Jiang Zixuan excitedly handed over the cake. I stared at the words, live a long life, on the cake for a long time before I remembered that today is my birthday. Since the passing of Jiang Xiang and Jiang's father, I haven't celebrated my birthday anymore. I don't know if Jiang Zixuan's brain is broken. He actually bought me a birthday cake. He put the cake on the windowsill and said excitedly, Shinshin, blow out the candles and make a wish. I blew out the candles and put my hands together to make a wish. Grandpa, on the day I die, I want you to come and pick me up. I took the fork and directly cut the 4 words, live a long life. Jiang Zixuan hurriedly pressed my hand. Shinshin, you can't cut it like this. It's unlucky. I threw down the fork and completely lost interest. I turned around and went back to the room. Shinshin, you can cut it however you want. It's all my fault. I shouldn't have said too much. He followed behind me, his voice a bit urgent. I leaned on the bed, feeling a bit blocked in my heart. He handed over a small piece of cake and said, happy birthday to you. I didn't take it. I just asked him with a smile, you let me eat cream. Do you want me to die sooner? He pursed his lips and kept shaking his head, and started to shed tears again. He opened his mouth to speak, but I directly covered my ears and didn't want to hear a single word. In the past, I had heard too many hurtful words from him and always hoped that one day he would forgive me. Now that I don't have long to live, he is finally willing to treat me well, but what's the point? The sun outside the window was just right. I was lying lazily on the bed basking in the sun, but I was disturbed by Su Chacha. When Jiang Zixuan was not around, she came to my ward. She put a bunch of nutritional products on my bedside and pleaded, "Sister and Xin, please be kind and let Zixuan go home. He has been outside for 3 months. Godmother is really worried about him." I sneered and directly exposed her words. "Is it you who are worried? Or is it Mom who is worried?" Her expression instantly froze and she glared at me fiercely. "You are about to die and your mouth is still so tough. Wait. I have plenty of ways to make Zixuan go home." Jiao Jiao rushed in. She directly reached out to pull Su Chacha's hair. "You are the green tea bitch who bullies our Xinshin. See if I don't beat you to death." During treatment, when my body hurt, Jiao Jiao would talk to me. As soon as I felt uncomfortable, I poured out all the grievances I had suffered over the years. Originally, I was just complaining. Unexpectedly, Jiao Jiao remembered it so clearly. Seeing that Jiao Jiao was about to be at a disadvantage, I propped up my body and wanted to help her. Suddenly someone grabbed Su Chacha's neck. It was Jiang Zixuan. He gritted his teeth and grabbed Su Chacha's neck. He threatened her viciously, "Didn't I tell you that when Xinshin is sick, don't come and stimulate her?" Su Chacha's expression changed in an instant. From fierce to innocent. Her eyes were filled with tears and she had a crying tone. "Zixuan, I am pregnant. The child can't live without a father." I took a deep breath and closed my eyes. That's good. The two are each other's first loves. Now that they have a child, they can form a new family. Really, it's very good. Especially good. Jiao Jiao patted my chest to calm me down. As she did so, my tears fell. "Get out." Jiao Jiao issued an order to expel the two of them. Jiang Zixuan grabbed Su Chacha's hair and threw her out. "Xinshin, I didn't have anything happen with her. The child can't be mine." I buried my head in the quilt and didn't want to hear a single word from him. He once drank cross-cupped wine with Su Chacha in front of me. If he said they had nothing to do with each other, no one would believe it. My mental state was getting worse and worse. I started clamoring to find Grandpa. Jiao Jiao always comforted me like soothing a child, but she never took me there. There was good weather outside again. Jiao Jiao pushed me to bask in the sun, saying it was helpful for my recovery. When I was talking about her medical dream with Jiao Jiao, Jiang Zixuan came over. He took out a bunch of photos and showed them to me one by one. On them were intimate photos of Su Chacha and her ex-boyfriend. Jiang Zixuan spread out his hands and said to me, "Xinshin, her child really has nothing to do with me. You don't need to tell me these. Even if you have a relationship, I can't control it. After all, Jiang Zixuan and I got divorced long ago. In the future, it has nothing to do with me who he will marry and have children with. I don't want to care and I don't have the right to care." Jiang Zixuan came over to hold my hand. Jiao Jiao slapped his hand away. "Don't mention this green tea bitch who forced our Xinshin to drink in front of Xinshin." His hand that was putting away the photos suddenly trembled and he choked up. "Xinshin, I was wrong. I was drunk at that time and my mind was not clear. Forgive me, okay?" I snorted coldly and turned my face away and stopped looking at him. "I already said that she forced me to drink. Not only did you not listen, but you also thought I was playing the victim." The more I said, the angrier I became. My hands were even shaking. At that time, there were already rashes on my neck. "You clearly saw them but pretended not to see them. You are really so annoying." I kicked him hard and wished I could kick him to death. Jiao Jiao gave Jiang Zixuan a sideways glance and pushed me back. Jiang Zixuan limped and closely followed behind me, repeating his apology like a broken record. What's the use of apologizing? The past harm really happened. How can two light apologies make up for it? The weather was getting colder and colder, and my mind was frozen and muddled. I didn't clamor to go out and bask in the sun anymore. I increasingly liked to curl up in the quilt and sleep. Time passed and it came to New Year's Eve. Jiao Jiao brought me a lot of food. I clamored to eat it all. After a series of actions, the snacks were only slightly damaged. I opened every package but didn't put anything in my mouth. I really wanted to eat, but my body didn't allow it. So I said to Jiao Jiao, "When you come to see me on tomb sweeping day, bring all these snacks." Her eyes instantly reddened. After a long time, she said okay. I also commanded Jiang Zixuan to buy me KFC, McDonald's, roast suckling pig. While he was out, I pestered Zhao Zhao to take me to see Grandpa. She couldn't resist me and drove me there. After driving for 3 hours, we finally arrived in Beicheng. It is said that this place has been under demolition in the past 2 years. I directed Zhao Zhao to drive according to my memory. After driving around here for an hour, I still couldn't find my hometown. I had to get out of the car and ask one by one. According to what the villagers said, I finally found the location of my home. The low courtyard had long disappeared. Now construction is going on here and there is dust everywhere. The phoenix tree in the courtyard was also gone. After looking for a long time, I only found the stump left after it was cut down. I covered my stomach and asked Zhao Zhao to buy a large bundle of yellow paper and 2 bowls of preserved egg and lean pork congee. 1 bowl is for me and 1 bowl is for Grandpa. After buying things, Zhao Zhao took me to Grandpa's grave. I didn't have the strength, so I could only ask Zhao Zhao to put the preserved egg and lean pork congee in front of the grave for me. Then I directed her to open the yellow paper and burn it all for Grandpa. This is the last time I come to see Grandpa. I have to burn more money for him. The little old man on the tombstone looked at me. I whispered softly, Grandpa, I miss you. Do you miss me? We will see each other soon. You have to come and pick me up. Zhao Zhao stood beside me. Tears dropped on the back of my hand one by one. I struggled to wipe them for her but couldn't muster the strength. Zhao Zhao. She took the initiative to hold my hand. Her eyes were red. Look forward to you becoming the top person in the gastroenterology department. Come on. Your dream will come true. Zhao Zhao held my hand tighter and tighter. Don't go. Shinshin, you have to watch me become the top person. Don't go. My eyelids began to fight. Sleepiness gradually came. I seemed to see Grandpa's figure. Zhao Zhao pulled me, crying and laughing. Shinshin, don't sleep. There are fireworks. Look at the fireworks again, okay? Her crying grew louder. I forced myself to stay awake and opened my eyes. I thought, let's watch the fireworks with Zhao Zhao one more time. I looked up and saw the starry sky. In the night, fireworks suddenly bloomed, like meteors falling, extremely brilliant. So nice. There are fireworks to see me off on the road to the underworld. Shinshin. I heard the familiar voices again, one male and one female. Looking back, I saw Mrs. Jiang running over staggering with bare feet. There were tears at the corners of her eyes. Her white hair had thinned a lot. The wrinkles on her face made her look 10 years older. Shinshin, Mom doesn't blame you anymore. Come back to Mom, okay? Mom was wrong. Mom shouldn't have been so fierce to you. Mom is really wrong. You will always be Mom's child. She grabbed a few white rabbit toffees and tremblingly stuffed them into my hand. Shinshin, don't leave. Please. Mom begs you. I watched her shed tears but couldn't wipe them for her. I could only squeeze out a sentence with all my strength. Mom, I'm sorry. Don't be sad for me. My consciousness gradually blurred. Jiang Zixuan shook my hand. His voice trembled terribly. Shinshin, I love you. I love you. Consciousness gradually fell asleep. I closed my eyes heavily. The little old man smiled and reached out his hand to me. Shinshin, Grandpa has come to pick you up. As the New Year's bell rang, I jumped and ran towards Grandpa. Holding his arm, I walked forward step by step and disappeared at the end of time. At the beginning of the new year, everything is renewed. I finally usher in a family reunion.